Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to do a comparison of the first and second Great Awakening. So we need to start with something that I actually skipped from Unit 2, which is the first Great Awakening. It occurred in the middle of the 1700s, so around 1730s through the 1750s. It started in Massachusetts, which you should remember is where the Puritans had settled in the New World. A preacher named Jonathan Edwards was concerned that Americans were not as religious as those who came over in the 1600s, and he began to preach about God's omnipotence, meaning God is all-powerful, and emphasized an idea called predestination, which is the idea that God has already chosen those who he means to save. And he gave his sermons telling people that sinners were damned. His famous sermon titled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God talks about how hell was paved with the skulls of unbaptized children. Just think about that for a minute. Quite the visual. So yeah, really uplifting stuff. But this did encourage, or at least scare, more people into church membership. George Whitefield was another minister who was a very good speaker, and he begins to travel around the U.S. giving his sermons that were very emotionally appealing. Even people like Benjamin Franklin, who were not very religious, were drawn to his style of preaching. A lot of people converted to Christianity because of these sermons, and others began to copy this style and travel around the United States too. Well, what will become the United States. These are still the colonies. But some people, especially the older generation, felt this style of preaching was too dramatic and over the top. These people were called the Old Lights. People who supported this new style of preaching were called the New Lights. Easy enough to remember. The First Great Awakening led to the New Lights creating centers of learning like Princeton, Dartmouth, and Brown. So this helped contribute to the higher education in the United States. Also, more church denominations were developed as people either agreed or disagreed with these new methods and formed their own churches. But most importantly, and probably what will be asked on the test, is that this helps unify the colonies before the Revolutionary War period, because people are now hearing similar ideas, similar education styles are being spread across the colonies. Unification is key. The Second Great Awakening happens in about the 1800s to the 1830s, so in Unit 4. After the Revolutionary War period, ideas of the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment begin to spread around the colonies, and more people began to become skeptical of religion. People were beginning to rely on science rather than the Bible, and this led to a strong religious reaction in 1800 called the Second Great Awakening. This awakening began in the southern frontier, but it eventually spread to the northeast and became even bigger than the First Great Awakening. In this one, they had what was called camp meetings in the frontier, where up to 25,000 people would come, listen to a sermon, and convert to Christianity. Some would slide back into their sinful ways afterward, but this did increase church membership significantly. People were preaching against the idea of predestination and instead taught something called the doctrine of free will, which meant that everyone has a choice if they wanted to give up a life of sin and choose to be converted. This is a very democratic approach to religion, so you do still kind of see these Enlightenment ideas and the Age of Reason ideas tied into this idea in the Second Great Awakening. Peter Cartwright was famous for traveling the frontier region giving sermons, but Charles Grandison Finney is the most famous preacher from this time. When he preached, he would have a bench in front called the anxious bench, where sinners who were trying to repent would sit in full view of everyone. So yeah, again, super uplifting and inviting. But I guess it is pretty creative. But he also did encourage women to get involved in the church, and he was strongly against alcohol and slavery. It was these beliefs of the Second Great Awakening that led to a lot of reform movements in the 1800s, like the temperance movement and the abolitionist movement, which we are going to discuss more either in another video or in class together. Okay, today's question is actually going to be about comparing the First Great Awakening with the Enlightenment, which we didn't talk about a lot in this video, so you might need to rack your brain and go back and think about what ideas of the Enlightenment would compare with the First Great Awakening, but you could easily be asked a comparison question about the First Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening and these Enlightenment ideas or even the Reform movements, so keep all of those ideas in mind. As usual, pause the video, think about how you would respond to this short answer question, and then check out the video's description for potential responses.